The Great Hall of Zenthari Prime was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. 17 alien species had sent their leaders to this meeting, and all of them were looking at the small group of humans standing in the center of the room. The year was 2847 by Earth's calendar, and Commander Daniel Hughes knew that this day would change everything. The hall itself was made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Around the edges of the room, alien representatives sat on platforms that floated in the air. Some of them looked almost human, while others were so strange that Daniel had trouble looking at them for too long. Hi, Chancellor Vorix of the Luminari floated forward. He was not made of flesh and blood like humans. Instead, he was pure energy trapped inside a shell that looked like a diamond. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. Humanity is hereby banished from the Galactic Union, Vorix announced. Your species is too dangerous to remain among civilized races. You are forbidden from entering Union space. You cannot trade with Union members. You cannot use the Hypergate network. This order begins now. Daniel felt his hands form into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. Beside him, Dr. Linda Morrison touched his arm gently. She was Earth's chief ambassador. She had spent 20 years trying to build friendship between humans and the alien races. Now all that work was being thrown away. May we know why? Linda asked. Her voice was steady, even though she was furious inside. A massive insect-like creature called Zixthal answered. He was a Krathanu, and his people were the ones who had caused all this trouble in the first place. Your people fought back against our raiders, he said, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. You built weapons without asking permission. You do not accept your proper place. Our proper place. Daniel could not stay silent anymore. Your raiders attacked our colonies. They tried to take our people as slaves. We defended our families. We protected our children. That does not matter, Vorix cut in. Weak species do not have the right to fight against stronger ones. This council has made its decision. You have 30 days to remove all humans from Union territory. Any humans who remain after that will become property of the nearest Union world. Guards came and led the human group out of the hall. As they walked through the shining corridors, Linda moved close to Daniel. They just made the biggest mistake in the history of this galaxy, she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Let's go home. We have a lot of work to do. 3 weeks later, the last human transport ship crossed the border into the empty space beyond the Union. Behind them, the great hypergates shut down, cutting humanity off from everyone else. On Earth, President Marcus Cole spoke to all the human worlds at once. His face appeared on screens across 17 planets. They threw us out because we would not bow down to them, he said. They thought we would die alone in the darkness between stars. They do not know us. They do not understand what humans do when we have no choice but to fight. We change. We create. We survive. And then we become stronger than ever before. The years that followed were hard. Without the Hypergate network, humans could not travel between stars easily. The trips took months or even years instead of seconds. Many people thought humanity would slowly fade away, just as the aliens expected. But humans did not give up. They never gave up. Dr. Samuel Price was a scientist who had always been laughed at by the alien researchers. They said his ideas about faster-than-light travel were stupid and impossible. But now, with no other choice, the human government gave him everything he needed to test his theories. Samuel worked day and night for 15 years. He failed hundreds of times. He watched his experiments explode. He started over again and again. And finally, on a cold morning in his laboratory on Mars, he succeeded. The first human-built full drive was nothing to look at. It was just a mess of wires and metal and glowing crystals. But when Samuel turned it on, it tore a hole in space itself. On the other side of that hole was a star system 300 light-years away. The fold drive was better than the hypergates in every way. The hypergates needed huge amounts of energy and could only connect fixed points. The fold drive could open a door to anywhere instantly, using much less power. When news of this reached the Galaxy Council, the aliens did not believe it. They called it lies and propaganda from a dying species. They were wrong. Over the next 50 years, humanity spread across the unexplored regions of the galaxy. Hundreds of ships went out in every direction, looking for new worlds to settle. They found planets with rich soil for farming. They found moons with valuable minerals. They found space stations left behind by ancient civilizations that had died. Millions of years ago, the ancient stations were the biggest discovery of all. The Union species, called the Builders' Precursors, and had been searching for their technology for thousands of years without finding much. But humanity, pushed out into the unknown, stumbled upon dozens of precursor sites. Inside these ruins, humans found wonders beyond imagination. Medical machines that could cure any disease. Energy generators that could power entire planets. Construction tools that could build starships in days instead of years. And weapons so powerful that nothing in the Union could stand against them. But unlike the Union species, who kept such discoveries secret and used them to control others, humans shared everything among themselves. A cure found on one planet was sent to all the others. A new technology was taught to everyone who wanted to learn it. The human population grew from 12 billion to 100 billion to nearly a trillion. The number of human worlds went from 17 to 50 to 300, and all of it happened in secret, far from the eyes of the Union. 150 years after the exile, the Union trading ship got lost in a hyperspace storm and accidentally entered human space. The alien crew stared at their sensors in disbelief. They saw shipyards bigger than planets. They saw space stations that glowed like small suns. They saw fleets of warships that made Union vessels look like toys. Commander Grace Turner appeared on their communications screen. She was young and pretty, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome to compact space," she said. "Do you need help?" The alien captain could barely speak. Everything she had been taught said that humans should be dead or dying. Instead, they had built something greater than the Union itself. "We are just lost traders," the captain managed to say. "May we refuel and leave?" "Of course," Grace replied. "All travelers are welcome here. We will show you the way to the nearest station." The aliens were treated with nothing but kindness. They received free fuel, free food, and free repairs. Then they were allowed to go home. But what they carried back to Union space was more dangerous than any weapon. They carried the truth about what humanity had become. And that truth would shake the galaxy to its core. Captain Kevin Marshall had been exploring unknown space for 3 years. His ship, the Perseverance, was one of many that humanity had sent out to find new worlds and new resources. Every day brought something different. Sometimes they found empty planets. Sometimes they found strange creatures. But today, Kevin found something that would change everything. "Captain, you need to see this," said Lieutenant Amy Santos. Her voice was shaking as she looked at her sensor screen. Kevin walked over and looked at the display. His mouth fell open. In front of them was a gas giant, a planet made entirely of swirling storms and colored gases. Around it floated rings of pure crystallized energy, something that should not exist according to normal science. But that was not what made Kevin's heart beat faster. Orbiting the planet were the ruins of ancient buildings. These structures were larger than cities, made of metals that gleamed with inner light. They were old beyond measure, built by beings that had lived and died millions of years before the first human walked on Earth. "The precursors," Kevin whispered. "The Union has been looking for sites like this for thousands of years." He gave the order to move closer. Over the next few weeks, his crew explored the ruins carefully. What they found inside was beyond anything they had expected. There were machines that could turn energy into matter, creating anything from food to building materials out of thin air. There were computers that contained the knowledge of an entire civilization. There were medical devices that could repair damaged bodies and extend life far beyond its natural limits. Kevin sent a message back to Earth. Within months, teams of scientists arrived to study everything. And this was just the beginning. Over the next century, human exploration ships found dozens more precursor sites. Each one contained new wonders. On a frozen moon near the edge of the galaxy, Dr. Carol Bennett discovered medical technology that could triple human lifespan and cure every known disease. On a world made entirely of metal, engineer Henry Ward found construction methods that let humans build massive starships in days instead of years. The discoveries kept coming. Energy weapons that could cut through any material, shield generators that could stop almost any attack, communication systems that worked instantly across any distance, computers that could think almost as fast as living minds. And through it all, humanity did something that the Union species never did. They shared everything. When Carol Bennett found the cure for aging, she did not sell it to the richest people. She gave it to everyone. When Henry Ward learned how to build ships faster, he taught his methods to every shipyard in human space. Knowledge flowed freely from world to world, making everyone stronger together. This was the core of what humanity was building. They called it the Human Stellar Compact, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. President Sofia Delgado spoke at the 100th anniversary of the exile. She stood on a platform floating above New Geneva, one of the most beautiful human worlds. Below her, millions of people watched and listened. "We will not become like them," she declared. "We will not conquer or enslave. We will never make others kneel before us. But we will also never let ourselves be weak again. We will build an empire of free people, joined together not by fear but by choice." The crowd cheered so loudly that the sound echoed off the mountains. On the fortress world of Sentinel, General Patricia Reyes watched the speech on a screen in her office. She was in charge of all human military forces, and she took her job very seriously. Her engineers and scientists worked every day to make sure that humanity would never be defeated. "How are the new shields coming along?" she asked her assistant. "The latest tests show that nothing in the Union arsenal can get through them," the young man replied. "We ran simulations against every weapon type we know about. Our ships can take hits for hours without taking damage." Patricia nodded, but she did not smile. "Good, but keep working. The Union has had thousands of years to develop weapons. We need to be ready for surprises." She walked to her window and looked out at the massive shipyards that covered the planet's surface. Hundreds of warships were being built at the same time, each one more powerful than anything the Union had ever created. "We do not want war," Patricia said quietly. "But if war comes, we will be ready." While the military prepared for possible conflict, human diplomats worked on a different kind of mission. Ambassador Richard Kane traveled to the edges of Union space, looking for species that were unhappy with Council rule. He found many of them. The Thrini were a gentle people who loved art and music. But the Krathanu had conquered them centuries ago and forced them to work in weapons factories. The Thrini hated their lives but were too afraid to fight back. Richard met with Thrini leaders in secret. He did not offer them soldiers or weapons. Instead, he offered them something more valuable: hope. "We were once like you," Richard told them. "The Union threw us out because we refused to be slaves. They expected us to die. But we survived, and now we are stronger than ever. You can be strong too. All you need is the courage to try." The Thrini were not the only ones Richard talked to. Across the Union, dozens of species lived under the boot of the more powerful races. They had been told for so long that resistance was impossible that they had stopped believing in freedom. Richard and ambassadors like him helped them believe. Again, meanwhile, the Union itself was falling apart from the inside. The powerful species fought each other constantly, each one trying to grab more wealth and territory. The Galaxy Council spent all its time managing these conflicts instead of looking outward. High Chancellor Morix, the leader of the Luminari, received reports about strange activity on the borders of known space. Ships that did not match any known design. Energy signatures that should not exist. Rumors of a hidden empire growing in the darkness. "It must be pirates or rebels," her advisors told her. "The humans are long dead. They could not have survived this long without our technology." Oryx wanted to believe them. It was easier than facing the truth, but the truth was coming whether she wanted it or not. 150 years after the exile, everything changed. The lost Vexery trading ship returned to Union space carrying impossible stories. Stories of human cities larger than planets. Stories of human ships faster than anything the Union had ever built. Stories of a human empire that made the Union look small. At first, no one believed the traders. They must have been fooled by some trick, people said. Or maybe they had gone crazy during their time lost in space. But then other reports started coming in. Scouts sent to investigate the borders never came back. Sensor stations detected strange energy readings far beyond Union territory. Communication channels picked up signals in human languages, signals that should not exist. The Galaxy Council met in emergency session. For the first time in 300 years, every single representative attended in person. The great hall that had once condemned humanity to exile now echoed with fear and confusion. "We must act," Admiral Krixavoth of the Krathanu demanded. He was the commander of all Union military forces, a warrior who had never lost a battle. "Send the fleet now, before they grow any stronger. And if they are truly as powerful as the reports say," asked one of the other representatives. "What then?" The admiral laughed. "They are humans. Primitive apes who were barely able to leave their own planet when we exiled them. No matter what tricks they have learned, they cannot match the combined might of the Union." High Chancellor Morix listened to the debate with growing worry. Something told her that attacking the humans was a mistake. But the council was afraid, and afraid people often made bad choices. In the end, the vote was almost unanimous. The Union would assemble the largest fleet in galactic history, and crush the human threat before it grew any. Larger, they had no idea what they were about to face. Admiral Krixavoth stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet gather. 50,000 warships had answered the call, coming from every corner of Union space. There were massive Krathanu battlecruisers with weapons that could crack planets. There were fast Vexery destroyers that could outrun almost anything. There were luminary energy ships that glowed like small stars. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. And Krixavoth was proud to lead it. "Set course for the human border world called New Hope," he ordered. "We will show these creatures what happens to species that forget their place." The fleet moved as one, jumping through the hypergate network toward their target. Krixavoth spent the journey planning his victory celebration. He would bring human slaves back to his homeworld. He would mount human skulls on his wall. The other species would remember this day for thousands of years. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the New Hope system. Krixavoth looked at the main view screen, expecting to see a primitive colony world defended by a handful of small ships. Instead, he saw something impossible. A wall of shimmering energy stretched across the entire star system, blocking his path like a curtain made of light. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, shifting colors from blue to gold to purple. And it was clearly artificial, built by hands that understood forces the Union had never mastered. "What is that thing?" Krixavoth demanded. Before anyone could answer, the wall flickered and became transparent. Now the admiral could see what lay on the other side. Human warships filled the space beyond the barrier. Not hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Each one was larger than Krixavoth's flagship, and each one radiated power readings that his sensors could barely measure. Behind the warships floated defense platforms the size of small moons, covered with weapons that his officers could not even identify. And behind all of that, safe and protected, the civilian population of New Hope was being evacuated. Krixavoth watched as millions of humans walked calmly through glowing portals, disappearing to safety somewhere far away. They were not panicking. They were not afraid. They had been expecting this. A human woman appeared on every view screen in the Union fleet. She was old but strong, with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen centuries of history. Krixavoth recognized her from intelligence reports. This was Patricia Reyes, the Secretary of Defense of the Human Stellar Compact. "Admiral Krixavoth," she said calmly, "you have entered our sovereign space with hostile intent. This is a violation of the peace we value above all else. You have one chance to withdraw." The Krathanu admiral laughed, though the sound was less confident than before. "You dare threaten us. We have 50,000 warships. What can you possibly do to stop us?" Patricia's expression did not change. "We have 300 years of preparation. Krixavoth looked at the human ships again. His tactical officers were shouting numbers at him, numbers that made no sense. The power output of a single human cruiser was greater than his entire flagship. The shield strength of their defense platforms was off the scale. But Krixavoth had never retreated in his life. He had built his reputation on victory after victory. He could not run away from mere humans, no matter what toys they had built. "All ships, attack formation," he commanded. "Advance and fire." The Union fleet surged forward, 50,000 warships unleashing their weapons at once. Beams of energy and clouds of missiles and waves of exotic particles all flew toward the human positions. The barrier absorbed everything. Not a single shot got through. Then the humans fired back. Patricia. Reyes watched the battle from her command center on Sentinel. She felt no joy in what was happening, only a deep sadness. She had hoped that the Union would listen to reason. She had hoped that showing them the truth would be enough. But some people only understood force human. Weapons were designed by scientists who had studied precursor technology for over a century. They used principles that Union physicists had never imagined. And human beams hit Union shields. They passed through as if the shields were not there. When human missiles struck Union armor, they converted the metal itself into energy. The Union fleet came. Apart in minutes, ships that had taken years to build were destroyed in seconds. Weapons that had conquered hundreds of worlds were useless against human defenses. The mighty Krathanu battlecruisers, pride of the Union military, exploded one after another like fireworks. Krixavoth watched his fleet die around him. He could not understand what was happening. He had never lost. He had never even come close to losing. And now he was being defeated by creatures he had always considered inferior. "All ships, retreat," he finally ordered, but for most of his fleet, it was already too late. Patricia gave her own order. Target their engines only. Disable, do not destroy. And prepare the rescue teams. The human ships stopped firing to kill and started firing to cripple. Union vessels lost their ability to move or fight, but their life support systems were left intact. As the battle ended, thousands of escape pods launched from the damaged ships. Human transports moved in to collect them all. When it was over, the Union had lost 43,000 ships. Every single crew member who survived was rescued by human vessels and taken to medical facilities. They expected torture. They expected slavery. They expected death. Instead, they received food, medical care, and comfortable rooms to rest in. Admiral Krixavoth was brought before a human tribunal 3 days after the battle. He walked into the room, expecting to be executed, and he was ready to die with dignity. What he found instead confused him completely. The room was simple and clean, with a table and several chairs. Sitting at the table was an old human male with tired eyes. Krixavoth recognized him from ancient records, Commander Daniel Hughes. The same human who had stood before the Galaxy Council 300 years ago. The same human who had been exiled and told to die in the darkness. "Sit down," Daniel said quietly. Krixavoth sat. He did not know what else to do. "We are sending you home," Daniel continued. "All of you. Every prisoner will be returned to Union space." The Krathanu admiral stared at him. "Why, we tried to destroy you. We came to enslave your people." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Yes, you did. And we could have destroyed your entire civilization in return. We have the ships. We have the weapons. We could burn every Union world to ash, and there is nothing you could do to stop us." He leaned forward, his old eyes meeting the admiral's compound ones. "But we will not do that. We are not like you. We do not believe that strength gives us the right to hurt others. We believe that strength gives us the responsibility to protect others, even our enemies." Krixavoth could not understand. This went against everything he had ever learned. The strong always crush the weak. That was the way of the universe. "Tell your council what happened here," Daniel said. "Tell them that we could have taken everything from them and chose not to. Tell them that if they ever threaten our people again, we will not be so gentle. But also tell them that we would rather be friends than enemies. The choice is theirs." The prisoners were loaded onto transport ships and sent back to Union space. They carried with them stories that would shake the galaxy. Stories of human mercy, stories of human power, stories of a species that had been cast out and had built something greater than anyone imagined. The Galaxy Council would never be the same again. The survivors of the Battle of New Hope spread across Union space, telling everyone what they had seen. At first, people did not believe them. How could humans, those primitive creatures who had been exiled so long ago, defeat the greatest fleet in history? It had to be lies. It had to be tricks. But then the evidence became impossible to ignore. Sensor recordings showed human ships tearing through Union defenses like paper. Medical reports proved that the survivors had been treated with care and kindness. And the cold, hard numbers told the story clearly. 43,000 ships destroyed. And the humans had not lost a single vessel. The Galaxy Council met again, but this time the mood was very different. No one was laughing at humans anymore. No one was calling them primitive or weak. Instead, the representatives of 17 species sat in stunned silence. Trying to understand how the universe had changed so quickly, High Chancellor Morix of the Luminari looked older than before. Even though her kind did not age like flesh beings, the weight of failure pressed down on her energy form. "We need to find a peaceful solution," she said. "We cannot win a war against them, and we should surrender," spat Representative Zixthal of the Krathenu. "Bow down to the creatures we once threw away like garbage." "And what is your alternative?" Morix asked. "Send another fleet. Let them destroy that one too?" The argument went on for days, but it did not matter. While the council debated, the Union was already falling apart. On the factory world of Threeny Prime, workers stopped their machines for the first time in centuries. For generations, the Threeny had been forced to build weapons for the Krathenu. They had been beaten, starved, and killed whenever they failed to meet their quotas. They had lost all hope of freedom, but hope had returned. Human ambassadors had visited them in secret before the battle. They had shared stories of how humanity had survived exile. They had given the Threeny small shield generators and communication devices. Most importantly, they had given them courage. "We are not soldiers," their leader Silantha told her people. "We do not know how to fight, but we know how to stop working. And without our labor, the Krathenu war machine will die." The Threeny strike spread from one factory to another. Within a week, all weapons production on their world had stopped. Krathenu overseers tried to force them back to work, but the shield generators protected the strikers from violence. When Krathenu warships arrived to crush the rebellion, they found something unexpected. Human ships were already there, not attacking, but simply watching. The message was clear. Touch the Threeny and face the consequences. The Krathenu backed down. They had no choice. News of the Threeny success spread across the Union like wildfire. On a dozen worlds, oppressed species rose up against their masters. Some of them had human help. Others found their courage on their own. But all of them were inspired by the same simple truth. The old powers were not as strong as they pretended to be, Ambassador. Richard Kane worked constantly during these months. He traveled from world to world, meeting with resistance leaders and government officials. He never promised human military support. Instead, he offered something different. "We will give you the tools to defend yourselves," he told the rebels of the Vexery colonies. "Shield technology, communication networks, medical supplies. What you do with them is your choice. But if you choose freedom, we will welcome you as partners." Some species accepted his offer immediately. Others were more cautious, waiting to see how events unfolded. And some, like the Krathenu, refused to accept that the old order was dying. But the old order was dying, whether they accepted it or not. Within a year of the Battle of New Hope, 8 species had formally withdrawn from the Galaxy Council. Some joined the Human Stellar Compact as full members. Others declared independence and began building their own nations. The once mighty Union was shrinking with every passing month. High Chancellor Morix watched the collapse and knew that something had to change. She was a proud Luminari, part of a species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. But she was also wise enough to see the truth. The Union had been built on fear and control. It had survived by keeping weaker species under the thumb of stronger ones. The system had worked for millennia, but it could not work against an enemy who did not play by the same rules. Humans did not conquer. They did not enslave. They did not demand tribute or obedience. They simply offered a better choice and let people decide for themselves. And people were choosing to leave the Union. Marix made a decision that no luminary leader had made in 10,000 years. She swallowed her pride and asked for a meeting with the humans. Her request was accepted. President Gabriel Santos agreed to receive her on Earth itself in the great city of New Washington. It was a gesture of respect that Morix had not expected. When her ship entered the Sol system, Morix looked out at the world that had given birth to humanity. It was a small planet, blue and green and white, surrounded by stations and shipyards that glittered like jewels. Hard to believe that such a tiny place had produced a species that now challenged the entire galaxy. President Gabriel was waiting for her in a garden, not a throne room. There were no guards with weapons, no displays of military power. Just flowers and fountains and the sound of birds singing. "Thank you for coming," Gabriel said. Gesturing for her to sit, Morix settled her energy form into a specially designed chair. "Thank you for receiving me. I know that my people have given you little reason to be friendly." Gabriel nodded. "That is true, but we believe in second chances. What would you like to discuss?" The conversation lasted for hours. Morix asked many questions, and Gabriel answered them honestly. She wanted to know why humans had not taken revenge. She wanted to know why they helped species that had once supported the exile. She wanted to understand how humans thought. "We could have conquered the galaxy," Gabriel admitted. "After we found the precursor technology, we had the power to destroy everyone who had wronged us." Our people wanted exactly that. Why did you not do it?" Gabriel looked out at the garden, at the children playing on the grass nearby. "Because that would have made us no better than you. We would have become the thing we hated. We would have built an empire of fear just like the one that threw us out." He turned back to face her. "We decided to build something different. An empire of choice? A place where every species joins because they want to, not because they are forced. Where everyone is equal under the law, regardless of how strong or weak they are." Morix was quiet for a long moment. "And you would accept even the Luminari? After what we did?" "Yes. Any species that wants to live in peace is welcome. Any species that wants to be independent has our respect. The only thing we cannot accept is aggression against our people or our allies." The High Chancellor made her decision. She did not announce it publicly right away, but she knew in her heart that the old way was finished. The Luminari would leave the Union and seek partnership with humanity. When she returned home and made the announcement, the Galaxy Council collapsed completely. Without the Luminari, there was no one left to hold the Union together. Some species went their own way. Some joined the growing human alliance. And some, like the Cthulhu, retreated to their home systems and built walls around themselves. The humans let them go. They did not chase or punish. They simply waited, knowing that isolation was its own punishment. The galaxy was being reborn, and humanity, the species once deemed unworthy of the stars, stood at the center of the transformation. Richard Kane watched the former. Union ambassadors signed partnership treaties with the Human Stellar Compact. Some of them had voted for humanity's exile. Some of them had laughed when the humans were cast out. Now they were asking to join the very people they had rejected. "How does it feel?" his assistant asked. "To see them come crawling to us?" Richard shook his head. "It does not feel good. It feels sad. All of this suffering, all of these centuries of pain, could have been avoided if they had simply treated us as equals from the beginning." He looked at the signing ceremony and managed a small smile. "But at least it is over now. At least we can start building something better together." The work of building that better future was just beginning. 500 years had passed since the day humanity was exiled from the Galaxy Council. The universe looked very different now. The Human Stellar Compact had grown into something much larger, the Galactic Commonwealth. Over 2,000 species had joined this alliance, spreading across every corner of the galaxy. There were the original human colonies, of course, but also the Luminary energy worlds, the 3 planets, the Vexery trading stations, and thousands of others. Every species kept its own culture and traditions. Every world governed itself according to its own laws. But all of them were connected by shared values and common purpose. They helped each other in times of need. They traded freely across the stars. They settled disputes through discussion rather than war. It was not perfect. Nothing made by living beings ever is. But it was better than anything that had come before. The Galactic Commonwealth Assembly met on a massive space station that floated between 3 stars. The station was large enough to hold representatives from all 2,000 member species. Along with their staff and visitors and observers, it was a city in space, filled with creatures of every shape and size. Chancellor Alina Reyes walked through the corridors on her way to give a speech. She was the current leader of the Commonwealth, elected by votes from all member worlds. She was human, but that was almost beside the point now. Leaders from dozens of species had held her position over the centuries. Alina thought about her ancestor, Patricia Reyes, who had commanded the defense at the Battle of New Hope so long ago. Patricia had lived to see the Commonwealth's founding, thanks to precursor medicine. She had died peacefully at the age of 412, surrounded by her family and friends. Before she died, Patricia had written a letter for her descendants. Alina had read it many times. "We built this alliance to give the galaxy a second chance," Patricia had written. "To prove that intelligence does not have to mean cruelty, that strength does not have to mean oppression. Guard this dream carefully. Protect it from those who would use power for selfish ends, and never forget where we came from." Alina entered the assembly chamber and walked to the speaker's platform. The vast room stretched out before her, filled with beings of every description. Some floated in the air. Some sat in pools of water. Some existed only as patterns of light. But all of them were citizens of the Commonwealth, equal under its laws. 5 centuries ago, Alina began, "My ancestors stood before the Galaxy Council and were told that humanity was not worthy of the stars. We were called dangerous. We were called aggressive. We were called inferior." She paused, looking out at the thousands of faces watching her. They were right about one thing. We were dangerous to their way of thinking. We were aggressive in defending our freedom. And we were inferior only in their estimation. The chamber echoed with sounds of approval from many different throats and speaking organs. But we did not build this Commonwealth alone. Every species here contributed something essential. The Luminary brought wisdom and the willingness to change. The Thrini brought art and courage. The Vexery brought commerce and practical thinking. Even the descendants of the Krathenu, who finally ended their isolation 3 centuries ago, have contributed their strength and their hard-won understanding. In the visitors' gallery, an old man watched the proceedings with tears in his eyes. Daniel Hughes had lived for over 800 years, sustained by medical technology that even he did not fully understand. He had seen things that no human should be able to see: the exile, the growth, the battles, the peace. Beside him sat Linda Morrison, equally old, equally alive. She took his wrinkled hand in hers. "We did it," she whispered. Daniel shook his head slowly. "They did it. All of them. We just started something." "That is all any generation can do," Linda replied. "Start something and trust the next generation to carry it forward." Down in the chamber, Alina was finishing her speech. "The beings who banished us are long gone. But their mistake teaches us an important lesson. They believed that power came from standing above others, from pushing others down so they could rise. They were wrong." She raised her hand, palm open, in the traditional human gesture of peace. "True power comes from lifting others up, from building bridges instead of walls, from turning enemies into friends. Let this be our promise to each other and to all the generations yet to come. We will never repeat the mistakes of the old Union. We will never let fear make us cruel. We will never forget that every thinking being has value and deserves respect. This is the Commonwealth way. This is our way." The assembly rose as one. 2,000 species raised their voices together in support. The sound was beautiful and strange and absolutely perfect. After the ceremony, Daniel and Linda walked slowly through the observation deck. Outside the great windows, ships from across the galaxy drifted peacefully together. A Krathenu trade vessel flew beside a human passenger liner. A Thrini art ship exchanged signals with a Luminari research platform. Children of a dozen different species played together in a zero-gravity park. Knowing nothing of the old hatreds that had once divided the stars, a young Luminari approached them, her energy form glowing with curiosity. "Excuse me? You are the human Daniel Hughes? Yes? The one from the old histories?" Daniel smiled. "I am, and you are. My name is Vorix. I was named after my ancestor, the one who pronounced the exile sentence on your people." The young luminary's light dimmed with shame. "I want to apologize for what he did." Daniel reached out and touched the edge of her energy field gently. "Child, you have nothing to apologize for. You are not responsible for the choices of your ancestors. None of us are. We are only responsible for the choices we make ourselves. But if he had not exiled you, so much suffering could have been avoided. Perhaps. Or perhaps we would have never discovered the precursor sites. Perhaps we would have become just another union species, fighting for scraps and looking down on those weaker than ourselves. We cannot know what might have been. We can only deal with what is." Linda stepped forward. "Your ancestor gave us a gift, though he did not mean to. He pushed us into the darkness, and we found light there. He forced us to rely on ourselves, and we became stronger than we ever imagined. Do not remember him as a villain. Remember him as someone who made a mistake and accidentally changed the galaxy for the better." The young luminary considered this for a long moment. Then her light brightened again. "Thank you. I will try to see it that way." She drifted away, and Daniel and Linda continued their walk. "Do you ever regret it?" Linda asked. "All those years of struggle? All the people we lost along the way?" Daniel was quiet for a long time. He thought about the friends who had not lived to see this day. He thought about the dark years after the exile, when survival itself seemed impossible. He thought about the battles and the betrayals and the endless work of building something new. Then he looked out at the peaceful galaxy beyond the window, at the ships and stations and lives that had been created by human.